everyone. Welcome back to the Pro Bono Happy Hour. I'm David Lipscomb, Director of Strategic Communications for PBI. This week, PBI's Eva Richardson spoke with Gary Connelley of Crowley Fleck. Gary talked to us about the challenges and opportunities that come with running a pro bono program in the western states of Montana, North Dakota, and Wyoming, his unique transition from being a legal services attorney to working at a law firm, and his reflections on 20 years of building a law firm pro bono program. We hope you're comfortable wherever you are, whether that's mid-commute, on your lunch break, or simply working at your desk, and we hope you enjoy the interview.
Hi, Gary. Welcome to the Pro Bono Happy Hour. Thank you so much for talking with us today. I hope your summer's off to a good start.
It is. I'm honored to be asked to participate.
Oh, great. Well, to start things off, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, your firm, and your firm's pro bono program?
Wow. Well, I'm a Montana native who went to undergrad and then law school here in Montana. I was a legal services attorney for the first 12 years in practice before I came over here to help Crowley start their pro bono project.
Mm-hmm.
We started discussing the project 20 years ago this spring, and then we officially kicked it off in October of 1996. So we're coming up on our 20-year anniversary. At the time we started, the firm was about 50 attorneys, mostly here in Billings, with one small branch office in Helena, which is the state capital.
Mm-hmm.
Since that time, we've tripled in size. We're somewhere north of 150 attorneys now. We're in 3 states, Wyoming with 3 offices, and North Dakota with 2, and then 6, I believe, in Montana. So we've grown quite a bit in the time of the Pro Bono project.
Yeah, we're celebrating our 20th anniversary here as well at PBI. So.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? I was actually, I was at the Pro Bono conference
Mm-hmm.
in St. Louis in 1997, and I ended up listening to, there was an afternoon session dedicated to firm pro bono, and that's where I first met Esther.
Oh, that's great. I'm curious to hear more about your career path. So how did you decide to become a lawyer?
Well, that's a great question. Actually, I was raised in a small town west of here, just north of Yellowstone Park, and I actually worked through college and law school, including after I graduated from law school, with the National Park Service in Yellowstone. I was a backcountry laborer on a roads and trail crew, and so it seemed to be a great way. Of course, that I made good money and lived in a beautiful spot, but it also, at that time, our school years were not on semesters, and we wouldn't start until late September, and in Yellowstone, it's snowing by then, so it was a good impetus and reminder to go back to school and stay in school. But I went to law school because I had a degree in political science. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with it. I was interested in the education, but I wasn't sure that I wanted to practice law. And like I said, when I got out of law school, I actually went back for my 9th summer in Yellowstone before I started looking around. And long story short, I ended up here in Billings for what I thought was a short period of time. And I thought that, well, no one's going to hire for such a short period. So I made a list of places to go in and volunteer because, again, I'd never worked in a law office. I didn't come from a family of lawyers. And the first place I walked into was Montana Legal Services and said, I've got some time to donate. And I think as incredulous as they were back then, they agreed, and I loved it immediately. And I don't think I volunteered for too long, maybe a month or two before they found some money. And then as there were some positions that opened up, I applied and ended up staying there for 12 plus years when I got a call to come over and talk to the Crowley partners about possibly doing something like this. I actually thought it was a crank call because there weren't many in-firm pro bono projects, and none in our area. So it went from there.
Right. So you were hired at the firm sort of to kick off the pro bono program?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes. It wasn't. I didn't go over on a job interview, at least at first. It was. I think that Montana's a large state geographically, but it's a small state in terms of the number of lawyers and stuff. And I had a number of law school classmates that are over here, and they knew what I had done and been doing at legal services because I had litigated in tribal court and had worked with migrant farm workers and done domestic violence work and a lot of elder abuse prevention work and guardianships. And I think for some reason they just thought I would be a good person to talk to about my thoughts on what kind of program they should or could develop here in Montana. And because we really had no role models to speak of, and it's sort of not the way we do it in the West anyways. We just, if we see a problem, we tend to address it, and it doesn't really matter if it had been done before, done a particular way. So by the time I got through meeting with a couple of panels of partners, shortly thereafter, they made me an offer, and then we talked about me coming over, and it was a pilot project at that time, so I had to weigh my chances of being successful in something that hadn't been done, at least in Montana. And by then I had learned that even the several handfuls or couple dozen of firms that had done this were mostly East Coast, Minneapolis, Chicago, not so much on the West Coast. I think there was a Perkins Coie, I think, in Seattle had one. But even of that small number, even fewer of the firms had gone outside their own firm to recruit someone with poverty law experience. So right. I thought that was unique, too. But I had to gauge how committed they were to the project, and that's why we committed on a 3-year pilot project. And then at the end of 3 years, I sat down with the executive committee to see whether or not they were going to incorporate it into the culture of the firm or whether we gained any toehold. And we did, and like I said, it'll be 20 years here in a couple of months.
Wow. Yeah. Can you talk about how that transition from legal services to working at a firm was like?
Back then, it was a more formal setting. So I was wearing a tie. It's not that we weren't formal at legal services, but, we didn't wear ties unless we were headed to an important meeting or certainly court. But over here, it was, more buttoned down. So that was a transition. Also, there were different computer systems, different phone systems. And after most of the day of orientation, I actually walked in my office, which is on the fifth floor, and I looked down, and my car was being ticketed, and I thought, well, this isn't a good omen. But it's, since then, it's just been a great transition. I really like the bigger office. I like the vibrancy of what goes on in a bigger firm. Some of the differences were pretty interesting because, for instance, at legal services, we would share a lot of reference books, including state codes and statutes and stuff like that. Or over here, I had access to my own sets, and it was just quite an eye opener for what the private practice was like. And I'm fond of saying, I'm a legal services attorney at heart, and I always will be. But right. And even though I'm not in private practice, I have a great view from my office as it goes by.
Great. And on a day-to-day basis at Crowley Fleck, how do you spend your time, and how do you kind of juggle the various demands that you face?
Well, that has, of course, changed over the 20 years. Currently, I still handle cases. Mostly more involved cases, domestic violence, UCC, JEAs, and elder abuse stuff. But a lot more of my time is devoted to developing projects in our branch offices, because we've always sort of adopted the view that at least pro bono out here in the West is local. I mean, so we take a look at what the needs are in the communities in which our offices are, and then we try and design projects or programs that help address some of those needs, given, of course, the interest and the experience and the backgrounds of our attorneys. But so consequently, I do a certain amount of training. I do a lot of consulting, a certain amount of co-counsel. I also work on the local and state bigger issues with the Supreme Court. We're lucky enough that about 6 years ago, our Supreme Court created a statewide pro bono coordinator, someone that I work with quite a bit, but Montana Legal Services is still relevant. There's local bar programs in many of our communities, some of which are sort of joint partnerships between Montana Legal Services and our local bar programs. And so it's a mix. I think someone once said that they spend a lot of their days doing something that they had no idea was an issue when they walked in that morning, and it's still that way. So it's exciting. It's never dull.
Yeah, it's exciting for us to be able to talk with someone in a smaller market too. And can you kind of share what this is like, and what are some of the unique challenges or opportunities that you face?
Our pro bono program is really just sort of front line. We do a lot of direct service. We're lucky enough in Montana that we have limited task services that are available and have been sanctioned by the Supreme Court, so that's really helped in recruiting lawyers. Of course, in my firm, they don't do family law. They are, although we have multiple practice groups, the general outline is we have litigation, both insurance defense and commercial litigation. We have transactional and estate and corporate work, and then we have a significant energy department. So one of the challenges has been try to find and recruit and retain firm pro bono attorneys from across the spectrum in ways that are often discreet and not necessarily just one-on-one development. So while we do a lot of direct service, we also have developed some mediation programs. We have, in our transactional department, we have attorneys that will work on sort of a pro bono tax practice group. We have an appellate pro bono practice group. We have attorneys that will represent small nonprofits that work with low-income people, such as Habitat for Humanity or Big Sky Senior Services, projects like that. Big Sky Senior Services, for one, does a lot of elder abuse prevention and has a pro bono, a guardianship program, and we have represented them since even prior to me coming over here. So the challenge out here is always geography. We're pretty centrally located, I think. Let me give you an example of that. Going to the east, and Bismarck is 420 miles. Cheyenne to the south is 500 probably, and Kalispell to the northwest is probably about 450 or so, 470. So we have gotten very good in our technology, so we can work not only across state lines, but across those distances. Getting to offices primarily requires driving because the air service is not particularly cheap. I mean, in order to, for instance, for me to go to Missoula, which is 350 miles west of here, and fly, I'd have to fly either through Denver or Salt Lake or possibly Seattle, which of course takes a ton of time and is incredibly expensive. So working across those vast distances can be a concern. I think the cultures, the law firm cultures and the pro bono cultures in the different states has a challenge. I think that in Montana, we're lucky enough that we have established a pretty progressive access to the courts and access to justice pro bono structure, framework. Those frameworks don't nearly exist to that extent in either North Dakota or Wyoming. Also, particularly in Wyoming, our offices are quite small. Small as I think 3 attorneys in Cheyenne, probably 5 in Casper, and probably 10 in Sheridan. But and also when you combine that with the focus on energy work out of eastern Montana and western North Dakota, the idea of pro bono, just in terms of dedicating time, in addition to the fact that their subject area is unfamiliar to most of our attorneys, is always a challenge. And so we have the full range of everything from direct service to limited service to corporate advice to mediation. Children's, actually it's parenting plan mediation for parents in dispute over their children, and we run the full gamut.
You touched on this a bit already, but can you talk more about what the demographics are like in Montana and what the areas of greatest legal need are?
The demographics, we have what we would call one urban center, and that's Billings. That's where I am, where probably 125, 130,000, but serve a much wider area of northern Wyoming and North Dakota. Billings itself is sort of the commercial and medical center. Otherwise, Missoula and Bozeman are university towns. Helena is the capital. Kalispell is up in the northwest. So in Montana is the sort of borrow Willa Cather's statement. We're a mile wide and an inch deep in terms of legal help. We have counties in eastern Montana that have, very few people and no lawyers. Addressing some of those legal needs is incredibly difficult and challenging, and it was back when we were in legal services, and it remains so today with pro bono, even limited pro bono help. We also have 7 reservations spread across our state. We are in Billings, almost touched by the Crow Reservation, which is a large reservation. Next to it is the Northern Cheyenne Reservation. We have reservations in North Dakota and Wyoming as well. And so we do a certain amount of work on reservations. Of course, each of them has their own system, and you need to be admitted to practice there. So I've tried cases in both of those, both Crow and Northern Cheyenne, but we also have a substantial, urban Native American population, and of course that brings particular issues to light when you're talking about family law issues, because it could involve the Indian Child Welfare Act, other more federal administrative services are involved there. So it can be very challenging, particularly when you're talking about domestic violence. I started my career at Legal Services representing victims of domestic violence, almost exclusively women, and often young women. And of course, I knew nothing about it. I received a big education in a hurry, but over that 32-year time span, I've seen a lot of improvements in how, as a society, we address some of those concerns, at least the initial safety. But to some extent, I think that we've become a little bit jaded to that, at least the courts have. And I think we're seeing a resurgence in the need, the demonstrated need out there for more domestic violence work, but also the realization that after the initial protection matters are resolved, it often leaves parenting plans or even divorces, and those are cases that are really hard to recruit attorneys to do. And any contested domestic violence case can be, it can be dangerous. It can be dangerous for the client, sometimes for attorneys. It can be difficult. And when you're charged with using scarce firm resources, you want to allocate them, the best way you can. And sometimes we spend a lot of time telling people no. And so those are challenges. Demographically, I think Montana, by I've been told by the year 2020 will be about the third highest in the United States in per capita of residents age 65 or older. That's not unique to Montana, but I think one of the pro bono and legal services and access to the courts issues that is coming with that are late in life divorces, and those are particularly difficult because the parties will not have an opportunity to really recover financially and sometimes not emotionally from that. So there's a lot of great issues out there. I mean, domestic violence on the reservations is incredibly out of control. It's really flyover areas. So I don't think people, at least nationally, think a lot about the provision of legal help in those circumstances to those populations. So that's something that we continue to work on.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. Can you share maybe one of your biggest pro bono successes, both personally and at the firm as a whole?
Actually, my failures, the things that didn't work out, are the ones that really stick out.
Oh, no, yeah. Or that, yeah.
And in fact, I'm lucky enough to have a summer associate that's dedicated solely to our pro bono project, and we're actually working on Uniform Child Custody Jurisdiction and Enforcement Act case that came out of our Bozeman office, which is 140 miles west of here, and it reminded me of a case that I'd done a couple of years ago, UCCJEA case that put hundreds of hours into and ended up losing. So that's what sticks out. Recently, we were able to get a good result in a domestic violence case that involved interstate issues. It involved mental health issues. It involved parental alienation issues. If I were to tell you the facts, it would read like either a law school exam or a bar exam question. Everything from property issues to interstate issues to domestication of foreign judgments to fighting domestic violence and getting experts on parental alienation. And so we're real happy with that. It's just it's certainly not missed upon me that took probably 200 hours, and it shouldn't take that much.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, there should be more help for people in those situations because we pick cases. We don't cherry pick cases to win, but we pick cases where there are no other resources for someone where sort of the last result. But even with that, we turn a lot of people no. So I don't spend a lot of time thinking about what we've been successful at as opposed to how much need is still out there.
What's on the pro bono horizon for the firm, either short or long term?
I'd like to expand our actual paid pro bono staff. That's something that's under discussion. We need to do a better job in North Dakota and Wyoming about establishing projects that are going to be sustainable, to get better at supporting those attorneys that are a long distance away with resources and backup to do that. So I think that I don't want to ever say that we're content in Montana, but I think the challenge is into moving into these other jurisdictions.
Right.
Most of our attorneys are cross-licensed, so that makes it easier in a lot of ways. I mean, it's smart for the firm to do that, but it also allows me to pull on a lot of resources that, let's say, for an issue in North Dakota, that I may not be using a North Dakota-sided attorney for that. So, goodness, it seems like the administrative stuff gets short shrift. So, we need to do a better job on, community outreach. Always, you need to shore up your relationships in the communities and on a statewide basis. So, those kind of things. There's there's always a long list. But it's exciting. It's interesting. I love it.
Yeah, you mentioned how you're kind of trying to bring a stronger pro bono presence into your other offices and jurisdictions. How do you kind of address pro bono skeptics who may not be the most amenable to doing pro bono work?
I ignore them.
Yeah.
Frankly, I mean, if I can, I do.
Yeah.
I think it's not worth my time to try and convince someone of something that they're not going to be,
Right.
They're just not willing to be open to. But I don't find that very often in our firm. We actually have good participation. I mean, we had 97 attorneys, last year that did legitimate, pro bono work.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
More than 4,000 hours just in our Montana offices, which I realize from a Pro Bono Institute perspective, that's not a lot, but that's huge here because we're a big dog here, and it's a big, but it's a shallow pond because the next largest law firm is probably 40 attorneys, and there might be a couple of those, and Montana's mostly sole practitioners and small firms. So our firm, in creating and supporting the project, committed to the idea that there's more that they should be doing and more they could be doing. So I try and work with associates who then have become partners, who now have. I mean, there's a lot of people here that are mid-level partners that have never not known Crowley Fleck. They have a pro bono program, so it's just grown up that way.
Yeah.
And I picked the low-hanging fruit. I'm not going to knock heads with people that just have a position that I don't agree with. But that just seldom happens. I mean, it's very collegial here, and if someone is opposed to the project, I don't hear about it, at least very often.
Oh, that's great to hear.
I mean, the firm has been, I know this sounds like a commercial, but when I started here, there are two things that I really had to have, and one was control over my caseload, because my big fear was that I'd come in every morning and there'd be a stack of notes of people to call that partners or other attorneys had talked to over the weekend. So I'd have control of that. And I had to be assured that the firm was committed to the idea that every client of the firm is the same, whether they're paying fees or not. And pro bono clients are as important as the president of the bank across the street. And I said that if I ever felt that wasn't, then that would be time for me to leave. And I haven't left, and I'm just very proud that the firm has really backed up what they said they were going to do. And so that means that we provide the best. And again, initially it was just litigation based, but we believe that we can provide the best legal services to our clients, and that includes pro bono clients. So if we need experts, we'll go out and get experts, and we ultimately foot the bill for that. If we need to travel, we travel. So we're not going to try cases with one hand tied behind our back because the client can't pay. So that's probably the thing I'm most proud of here.
And if you had a magic wand, what one thing would you change about access to justice?
I would tap every judge on the shoulder with that magic wand and create or have them adopt a much broader view of pro bono and the needs for low-income people, not only to access their courts, but also to have a chance to be successful. One of the things that I've seen over my career and been involved with is the creation of state-funded self-help law centers. And because, like in many states, there's just been an explosion of pro se litigants that I think is an issue that the courts were late to the party but they're there too. But now it becomes, I think a lot of their focus is on how can we deal with these cases and not so much the people. So I would have them understand that access to the courts is not access to a fistful of forms, So what it is access to fiscal forms. So I would want to do something under that. I would like to see the system recognize that children are as important as insurance defense cases,
Right.
and that attorneys or judges should be educated in those substantive issues and child development and that sort of thing, because oftentimes it's family law that gets shuttled to the standing masters or shuttled off to other things. But that's also in part why we created our mediation, our pro bono parenting plan mediation project, to try and help the children by helping their parents and keeping them out of court. So that's what my magic wand would do. Just recognize that cases are people and not just numbers that they need to manage somehow.
And to finish things up, I have one last question. Who is your pro bono role model and why?
I'm not a guy that grew up having heroes and stuff, but my heroes are three attorneys that I worked with at Legal Services, Bob LaRouche, Mike Aiken, and Maria Beltran, as well as Judy Williams and some other people, because they are, I didn't know much about legal services when I was in law school. I interned for environmental clinics and some defense clinics and stuff, and so the whole legal services thing was new to me until I walked in the door and said, I think I can get some experience here. But those people are such great lawyers with such big hearts, too. I mean, they're excellent lawyers, and the people that have dedicated their lives when they could have done everything from being a law professor to being in private practice and making a lot of money. And so they're the people that I really respect. In terms of, pro bono, Patty Fain, who's the Supreme Court's pro bono coordinator, has just done tremendous work across the state in helping local bars, as well as the Supreme Court and the Commission on Access to Justice to pay attention to important issues and to get involved and to recruit the people that are necessary. So, pro bono, it's, when I came here, pro bono was just strictly, sort of one-on-one sort of thing, and somebody from legal services would call up and beg somebody to take a case, and to some extent I inherited some of those same difficulties, but we've been fortunate enough, because I think of the commitment of the firm as well as the financial resources to not only do that, but to develop programs, a true in-house law firm program that does lots of different things and hopefully addresses the needs in some of our communities, but also addresses and opens the eyes of some of our attorneys, so they will see the importance of that work. So I don't think there were a lot of sort of pro bono people other than just individual lawyers who always took cases, who, of course, I always looked up to.
Great. Well, Gary, thank you so much for being a guest on our podcast. It was a pleasure to talk to you and hear about your firm's pro bono program and your experiences as a lawyer.
Thank you very much. Again, I'm honored to be asked.
Thanks again for listening to our interview with Gary Connelley of Crowley Fleck. We thank Gary for the very helpful geography lesson and for sharing his experiences. Before we go, we want to let you know about an upcoming webinar. Join us on June 22nd at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time for Pro Bono in Practice, Representing Children and Adolescents. This webinar, produced in conjunction with West Legal Ed Center, is part of our Best of the 2016 PBI Annual Conference Series. The webinar will explore pro bono opportunities and developments related to representing children and adolescents, including emerging issues, how to get started, and opportunities for collaboration. Visit www.probonoinst.org/webinars for more information. To listen to more podcasts in this series or learn about additional pro bono resources, visit www.probonoinst.org/podcast. If you're interested in having your firm featured on the Pro Bono Happy Hour, please email us at probono@probonoinst.org. Also, don't forget to follow us on social media to get the latest information from PBI. On Twitter, we are @ProBonoINST. Search for Pro Bono Institute on both Facebook and LinkedIn to connect to our pages. Also, visit youtube.com/Pro Bono Institute to check out our latest videos, including episodes of the Pro Bono Happy Hour. That's all for this episode. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time on the Pro Bono Happy Hour.